Welcome to Dread Pirates Really Quick Reviews, where we give a spoiler-free rundown and reading recommendation for pulp stories. Fantasy, sci-fi, horror, short, long, indie, literary, whatever. If it's fiction that sticks, the Dread Pirate wants it. Out among the Smoky Mountains and the ranging backwoods of Appalachia, far from castles and gallant armored knights, you will find another kind of fantasy. These phantasmagoric backwoods are home to odd folk, the types yet untouched by the modern hand of civilization. And through their mysterious ranks troops the intrepid Balladeer. No blade or gun carries he, no warhammer or double-bladed axe to crush his enemies. He does not desire the lamentation of women. He carries a humble guitar, whose only exception to a rude appearance are silver strings. He does not collect heads nor treasure. He wants only for a place to lay his head, a meal to sustain him, and knowledge of the folk songs in the lands he walks. He is John the Balladeer. But first, some background on the author and story. Manly Wade Wellman was a fantasy and sci-fi author who lived from 1903 to 1986. He was a frequent contributor to Weird Tales pulp magazine. He was also good friends with Kane author Karl Edward Wagner. The two were camping buddies, and man, talk about a couple of bros. I would have loved to hang out with them. Both are immensely gifted at writing in different ways. Wellman is best remembered for writing the John stories, as he simply called them. I found Wellman's John character through Appendix N, the section of the Dungeon Master's Guide from Advanced D&D where creator Gary Gygax notes various authors and specific works that inspired his role-playing world. While only Wellman himself is listed and not specific books, his John character is credited as a primary germination of the Bard class. Just as Conan inspired the Barbarian, John inspired the magic-casting minstrel. And just as a note of transition from the tabletop game to the literature, the modern D&D Bard archetype, or stereotype depending on your view, of the wisecracking swashbuckler who wants to bed every NPC and monster he comes across, did not come from John the Balladeer, at least in my reading experience thus far. John is very much a stoic interloper in search of and in reverence to the folkloric ballads of the fantasy Appalachia he journeys through. He has very little desire for personal gain outside of gathering, preserving, and learning songs. Often he's not the center of attention in his own stories, and I found this reserved interpretation of the archetype refreshing compared to the modern Playboy iteration. The stories of John are a collection of short works, as well as 5 novels. I'm working through the short stories, which are collected in the volume here. I'll link to the Amazon listing below if you're interested. It's a nice copy, good size, and fun cover art that gives you a good sense of the character and the types of stories within. A strength of these stories is the sheer imagination behind the settings. Wellman is John the Balladeer in more ways than one. He draws on real American folklore for his bard character to experience through plot beats, antagonists, or occasionally as characters who need his help. Now, my collection is forwarded by Karl Edward Wagner, Wellman's good friend, who writes that Wellman was a folklorist first and a pulp fantasy writer second. And it shows. Those stories are dripping with real songs, real horrors of Appalachian legend, and the settings are described authentically by someone who you can tell actually lived in the settings of these stories. The other main strength of Wellman's writing is his talent for that particular region's southern dialect. The narration is from John's perspective in first person, and I couldn't help connecting his way of speaking to the narration of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, although they're two different regions of the American South. But Wellman's authenticity is on par with Twain. I taught Huck Finn in my English classroom for years, and you get a sense of realness that really serves to draw you in to what are otherwise fairy stories. It really deepens the immersion as you read. And here's a description of a monster from the story One Other. The hayfork fingers grabbed the rock, and a head and shoulder heaved up where we could see them. The shoulder was a cypress root humping out of water, and the head was a dark pumpkin, round and smooth and bald, with no face, only 2 eyes. They were green, not bright green like cat eyes or dog eyes in the night. They were stale, rotten green, like something spoiled. Now, compare that quote in particular to Mark Twain's description of Huck's father, Pap Finn, who's a different kind of monster in The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. There weren't no color in his face, where his face showed it was white. Not like another man's white, but a white to make a body sick, a a white to make a body's flesh crawl, a tree toad white, a fish belly white. Discovering these stories has been the highlight of the last couple of weeks of my reading life. I love fantasy that's based in the folklore of America. Not urban fantasy so much, but the older kind you find in Weird West subgenres or colonial America like Legend of Sleepy Hollow. I think it's such a rich, untapped setting compared to saturated Europe. And as an American myself, I have aspirations to one day contribute some stories to an old American fantasy setting. For a creative working title, I simply call it Hyborian America. There's concepts floating around in my brain for Mount Rushmore as giant kaiju-level titans wandering the Midwest plains, a death cult in Arizona that worships an enormous Gila monster as an elder god and holds the realm hostage by controlling the water supply. So as you can probably tell by all my praise, Wellman's short works of John the Balladeer earn a hearty recommendation. I can't believe Wellman isn't talked about more. Maybe he is, and I'm just in the shallow end of the proper channels, but Wellman certainly deserves more celebration than I've found of him. So, let me know what I don't. I haven't explored any of Wellman's novels yet. Are they as good as Wellman's short fiction? I also hear there's a pretty terrible movie adaptation from the 70s out there. Any fun to be had watching it? Comment below, and thanks for all the support so far. For now, I am the Dread Pirate. Until next time, keep reading.